Bloomer, co-founder of Fell Brewery, and we're going to talk about their sustainability work, in particular calculating and bringing down carbon emissions at their brewery in Flookburgh, with support from the Westmoreland and Furness Green Enterprise Hub. Welcome to the podcast, Tim. Thanks for joining us. Can you just start off by telling us the story of Fell Brewing and talk a bit about the work you do?
Sure. Well, thanks very much for having me to begin with, Joe. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. So yeah, we've been operating for just over 11 years now. Fell is the consequence of me and my best mate from school coming out of the sort of 2008 financial crisis and the rubbish jobs market that there was on offer at the time. And with an awful lot of ignorance and naivety, thinking it would be really straightforward and easy to start a brewery and take the global brewing industry by storm and be multimillionaires after a couple of years. But here we are 11 years later, having come down to earth and grown up somewhat. And no, as much as haven't quite managed that agenda, we've had a really good run and have grown into an organization now who, through our bars business as well, employ in excess of 40 people and are well established across Cumbria and the wider north of England.
That is impressive. When you were starting out around 2008, was that kind of at the time that craft brewing was taking off? Like, I think I remember like Brewdog was one of the biggest businesses that kind of started it. Were you part of that movement as well?
Yeah, so I was at university in Edinburgh, and 2006 to 2010, and it was kind of just kicking off then. Brewdog were getting going, and there were a few other of the really early adopters, and then myself and Andrew, my business partner, we went to the States for a sort of end of university celebratory road trip and went over there, and it was this incredible thing by then over there. And yeah, basically I sort of sat there and thought, this is amazing, this is going to happen in the UK. And yeah, it did. So, and in that sense we were right. We didn't know quite well enough what we were doing to really put pedal to the metal and take advantage of it. But yeah, it's been a hell of a ride the last few years, and it's been hype and turbo, but it's just starting to settle down now into something that I hope is going to be really good.
Definitely, yeah. We will get on to talk a bit about that on this podcast, kind of where the business is in 2024, and in particular in relation to sustainability. So you've recently moved into a new role within the business, looking after sustainability specifically. How did this come about?
Yeah, so the business has been operated at director level by myself and Andrew from the get-go, and it has grown into, well, having been just the two of us grafting away on our own, to then getting a handful of employees as a team, to us realizing kind of middle of the way through last year that there are, in some cases, 4 layers of management at this sort of stage. And yeah, basically, after a lot of soul searching and a lot of thinking about our priorities and what we wanted to do, we've kind of landed on the decision that we didn't really have the expertise ourselves. We've never received any formal management training. We've not really got hugely, given how young we are when we started Fell, we don't have a huge amount of experience in the wider industry or indeed in other sectors. So we took the decision to seek the help of someone with much more experience in management and wider business. And so we have, over the last year, been going through the process of bedding in a new managing director. He officially took over the reins at the start of this month. And as a consequence, Andrew is continuing his role as operations director and will stay very much busy with that. But I am now given the space to move into this new role because it has become the thing that I find the most interesting in the business and that I'm the most passionate about.
So yeah, that's a real commitment from the business to sustainability and to kind of putting a plan in place to reduce carbon emissions that you're kind of looking after it full time. How has that work been going? Like how far along are you with that plan?
Sure. So we sought to try and get to grips with this in 2019. I'm first to admit that the pandemic then did take over everything for a couple of years, but it was sort of, come in 2022, I started to begin to explore what was what was at stake, what the pathway kind of might look like, what might be the beginnings of our philosophy in terms of addressing this issue. And yeah, so kind of just as more and more time went along, it kind of became something that I just realized required more and more focus, more and more sort of just, yeah, commitment and time and energy, particularly as, because this is such kind of a new thing for so many businesses. It's, there's not a textbook that we can pick up yet with a perfect blueprint as to how to go about doing this. It is in its own way a bit of an inexact science at the minute. And so, yeah, I have been kind of doing it off and on, little bits here and there, taking it very seriously, but in and amongst all the other responsibilities that I had, until, yeah, about 6 months ago, I kind of started to realize that if we really wanted to achieve something special, if we really wanted to do something that was something where we could really plant our flag and say, we're taking this incredibly seriously and are doing it and are confident that we're doing it as well as we should be, then that was going to require a much greater degree of focus and, yeah, of my energy and time.
So you've been working with different organizations, Cumbria Action for Sustainability being one of them, and then you've had some carbon accounting done. Um, that when we talked prior to recording, that was really interesting to hear about that, and the areas of the business that produce the most carbon. And can you just give us an idea of that?
Sure. So, first started working with CAFs. It was possibly late 2022, and yeah, we got a. They helped us in the beginnings of a really quiet, just very early stage carbon footprint, and that was focused on what gets called Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. That's effectively our own operations and our own practices and procedures and the emissions that we either emit directly or through the energy that we use in doing that. And so we started to get the beginnings of a sense of what that might look like, saw a number, and but were then drawn effectively to this idea that your overall carbon footprint is also going to include Scope 3, which is going to be all the carbon associated with all the processes, products, and services up and downstream from you. And I was told by some industry experts that that was going to be probably somewhere in the region of 3/4 of our emissions. And so at that kind of stage, I started to think, well, we're going to have to do that because we can't talk about true credibility unless we started to address that. And then
You're
at that
talking about
stage,
your raw materials coming into the business, and then your vans like delivering the product on the other end. There's so much
absolutely,
to take into account, isn't there?
yeah, it's taking the full supply chain into account, and it's effectively taking true responsibility up and down the ladder for what happens as a consequence of what we do. And yeah, it became obvious to me quite quickly that that was going to be complicated, and that was going to be something where if we started to use a lot of simplifications and started to use a lot of stuff that made our lives easier in terms of assessing it, well, that absolutely has a huge amount of value to add for a lot of people. If we wanted true credibility here, we needed something much more robust. And so, working with CAFs on their recommendation, I approached Small World Consulting out of Lancaster, founded by Mike Berners-Lee, the head patron of CAFs, who's based out of Lancaster University. And they are a much more kind of, well, they tend to deal with much bigger clients. They've done an awful lot of really robust work with Brewdog a number of years ago. And basically I said, look, can we work together here to seek to find a way to bring a deeper understanding to what it is that we're doing? And they've been great. We've been working with them for the best part of a year now. And about a month ago, we were confronted with their assessment of our true carbon emissions for the brewery. And predictably, there was, when you see it on paper, when you actually see what it all boils down to, there are things that you might have expected, but then there are all these things that you've clearly overlooked. And there are all these things that are surprising. And it's only really when you see this true picture that you can begin to make some really coherent decisions about how you might go about reducing it. In terms of talking about like how we ended up going down this route, I remember early doors with the initial numbers that were coming out of our very early carbon footprinting with CAFs. At that stage, I went online, saw the number, and just out of interest, sort of thought, how much would it cost me to buy sufficient carbon offsetting tokens for us to turn around and say we are carbon neutral? And I remember coming across an idea that it would cost somewhere in the region of 600 quid. And, that represents significantly less than 1% of our revenues. That is, a fraction of the amount of money we give to a local charity every year anyway. And I just sat there and thought that is such an enormous cop out for us being able to turn around and say we're no longer part of the problem here. We're climate neutral. I think that international carbon offsetting is a scandal waiting to be unveiled. And it was very early doors that we said, that's not what we're going to do. We believe quite strongly that there is absolutely space for offsetting in the mix. But when it's something that is on the basis of what somebody else in another country is promising at some point to do, you can't, claim that as legitimately acting responsibly with respect to the climate crisis. And so effectively, we took the hard decision that what we really needed to do was actually decrease the amount of emissions associated with our operations, which is, in typical Fell Brewery fashion, much more difficult than doing it the other way around.
So yeah, you've taken some serious steps towards that, and as you say, you're kind of looking at your supply chains and things like that as well. One of those steps was to do with reducing on-site emissions. You've installed solar panels. How do you go about, because surely it takes a lot of energy to brew beer. How do you go about reducing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Beer is brewing is a very energy intensive process. No matter what you do, you have got to boil thousands of liters of fluid for an hour. If you don't do that, you won't have beer and it'll taste awful. And so, we are a significant energy consumer down at our Flookburgh production site. But like so many small businesses, we operate in an industrial unit with a big roof. And so in early 2021, we started looking into the scope for putting a big solar array on our roof. Worked closely with a local company called Glow Solar, based out of Levens, who I'd recommend heartily to everyone. And got some analysis done. And I don't need to tell small business owners and people in in the industry how expensive energy has gotten and how much of a problem it's gotten. And with the new numbers that we now have, even though they are starting to come down a little bit, even still, it became obvious to us that we were going to see a payback period here of something less than 5 years. And I was quite taken aback by that. That kind of return on investment is something that rarely comes along. And so, to be honest, as much as it is a good thing to be doing for our sustainability point of view, I'm not going to sit here and deny that probably our principal driver for doing it was for commercial reasons of saving money. Solar's been brilliant for us. We probably reduced our energy bill by somewhere in the region of, we think, 40% last year. And yet we are on track to repay our investment in solar in just over 4 years at the minute. And yeah, I'm really quite staggered. They should have a lifetime of, if everything goes well, 20 years and should generate lots of electricity for at least 10.
Wow, that's fantastic. In our discussion prior to the recording, we also talked about the vehicles that you use, and you're concerned about the emissions from them, and you're speaking to CAFs about EV possibilities. How have you found all of that?
Yeah, it's again, I suspect that I'll mimic a lot of what other small business owners and people who work in them are feeling, which is that electric vans are a wonderful idea, but they're not feasible yet. That is what I thought was the case. And, we see price tags on them of upwards of 60, 70, 80,000 pounds. And it is very easy for you to effectively turn around and say, oh, well, I can't afford one of those. I'll address the situation in however many years' time. But yeah, this has climbed right up our agenda now because we have effectively begun to realize that the time for change is not in the future, it's now. And indeed, again, an awful lot of the economics are starting to stack up in favor of them as well. Beer is heavy and it takes up a lot of space. And we have 3 vans on the road that crunch tens of thousands of miles, and it is around about 20% of our carbon emissions is associated with transporting all that beer around. Diesel is a huge cost for us, and also keeping those vehicles on the road and keeping them maintained is also a huge cost for us. I agreed off the back of a recommendation from CAFs to take a subsidized consultation from a commercial EV consultant that they work with called Simon Brace. Simon's great. He is candid and honest and gets it. He operates a sort of independent courier delivery service with just with one EV all over the Lake District, and he has been doing so now for a number of years. So when you speak to him, you realise that this isn't in the future, this is now, and the option is there. And then with his help, with a better understanding of what's available, he has a huge amount of insight into what the market's actually like in terms of the options that are available for EVs, what's coming, what the reality of the second-hand market looks like, and all this kind of stuff. It is changing rapidly, and it is absolutely something that I encourage all business owners to look to much sooner. We are going to purchase our first electric van this year, and again, we see that being an investment that is going to pay back because we will see significant savings from fuel reduction. And we can obviously get a chunk of the recharging done off our own solar panels, but even still, even without that, the difference in price is significant and stark. And also the other major thing is that, generally speaking, you are talking about far less requirements with respect to maintenance. We all know how tough it is when you're putting big heavy loads in vans and sending them out on the road to do thousands and thousands of miles a year. this again is something where there's a significant saving to be made.
That's brilliant. And with like if you're kind of going up and down the country, even just in Cumbria, there are huge distances to travel, and do you feel that the infrastructure is there to keep the vans charged up as they're out and about?
Well, the short answer is yes, and it's growing and expanding all the time. There are press releases every day about new charging points. But what I think I spoke to Simon about that was something that was really interesting that changed my perspective on it is this idea of if you come at it from the frame of reference of seeking to replace your diesel van and exactly what it does, and saying rather, this is the van that I'm looking at buying. What can it do? And design your deliveries and all this stuff around it. It did not take us long at Fell to kind of realize the number of preconceptions that aren't based on a great deal in terms of how we do things. And so consequently, we are now looking at a scenario where we're beginning to change preemptively in order for this to happen. How will we deliver? How we go about doing things with a view to extending the range of electric vans. So, things like unloading earlier rather than later in the mileage set, in terms of the mileage that you're going to do on a delivery route. And then, making it work with what you can do, because, as long as your van can get back to base at the end of the day, you come in the next day and it's charged. And there's probably an awful lot more flexibility for an awful lot of people when they really think about it, and particularly when they think about it in terms of the savings that they might be able to make.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about the sort of other initiatives that you guys are involved in, with reference to the environment and the community. You do fundraising for South Cumbria Rivers Trust. How did this partnership come about?
So I mentioned it briefly before. It's it goes back to talking about carbon offsetting. When I was sort of early doors, trying to figure out how we might go about setting Fell up on its path to climate neutrality or net zero. Started to look at carbon offsetting and the reality of what that looked like, and it kind of came about off the back of me sitting there realizing this is rubbish, this is no good. I'm not going to write a check to someone who says they might do something in Ecuador. And so basically what occurred to me was that South Cumbria Rivers Trust plant a lot of trees every year, and they boost biodiversity. They encourage growth of vegetation on riverbanks. And I kind of approached them originally on the basis of acknowledging that a lot of the work they do is actually carbon sequestering. But then it kind of developed from there into something that has now been embraced much more widely by the team. It's 12:30 on the 15th of May, and here we are looking at a news headline about this huge leak of raw sewage into Windermere. We are a community-minded business, particularly through our bars businesses. They are well supported by a lot of regular customers who come in, and because we have good retention of our staff, we are a tight-knit team, we get to understand what matters to our community. And it just seems to be something that really gets under the skin of people here in Cumbria. These lakes and rivers are this integral part of our landscape and our lives, and they are not getting looked after as well as they should be. And we want to see them being looked after better, and we want to see people, particularly the authorities, taking it more seriously. And so, it just seemed to be something that the more I spoke to people, the more it was kind of something where everybody could agree, particularly locally. And so I started talking more and more to the trust and just getting a really good understanding of the kind of practical approach that they take to things. They do a lot of work that is, very much in collaboration with the agricultural sector. It's done by consent. They do a lot of stuff that could be win-win for everyone. And it's just taking the deep understanding that they have and applying it to making our waterways better. And yeah, I was really impressed by the work that they did. They are just up the road from the brewery, and kind of, again, similarly to Fell, they're a young team and they're a passionate team and they're committed to what they do. And so, yeah, we have a beer called Gill. It is our kind of easy drinking golden ale that we have on cask. And I sat there and effectively realized that there was the scope for us to do a kind of direct fundraising scheme specifically through that beer, particularly it being called Gill. And so, yeah, every time someone drinks a pint of Gill, we make a donation to South Cumbria Rivers Trust. We are just getting to, it will be the 1 year anniversary of this at the end of this month. And we will write, well, we have already written a couple of checks, but overall we'll write another check, which will take our annual total to just shy of £5,000. And the big thing that the Rivers Trust said, and which is kind of at the heart of our major commitment to them, is that, like so many charitable organizations that do a lot of project-based stuff, that do a lot of stuff that is a bit here, there, and everywhere, the thing they really need is long-term commitment with respect to fundraising. You know, so much stuff is reliant on applying for a new bunch of things, and maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. And so this is a commitment that we are making for years to come. This is not something we're about to stop. This is something that we hope to be able to say to them, you can rely on this as part of your fundraising for years to come. And it's been a brilliant collaboration.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think the ability to help clean up Cumbria's rivers and lakes by drinking beer is a win-win
Indeed.
situation. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
It's a great initiative. And I'd encourage anyone to check out Fell Brewing's website for more information on that. Just one last point before you leave, Tim. What's your advice for other businesses looking to go down the same route you guys have gone down?
Yeah. So I think, you know, there's, what I'd say is that there's a lot of thought out there that this is big, that it isn't revenue generating, that this is something that it is easy for small business people to put on the back burner with a view to getting round to one day. And, like, you know, I get it. I totally understand that we are busy people and we have incredibly busy lives. But my message to other businesses look to decarbonize would be that this is perhaps easier than you think, particularly if you take the outlook of, rather than getting a grips with how do you get to the end goal of being net zero, you know, of, if you ask yourself the questions, you know, what are the easy wins that we can make? Where can we make a start that is going to be really meaningful, that is, you know, set yourself up to succeed. That's kind of where we've gotten to, and now we will get to the nitty gritty of really kind of bed down into the details. But, you know, our experience, frankly, so far has been cost saving, and that's really, really good. And so CAFS is a brilliant organisation, and I am yet to give them any money, I'm pretty certain. And yeah, they are here. They are different to your average kind of local sustainability group. There is world-class expertise in this organization, and it is available for all businesses in Cumbria to seek to. So, I mean, particularly with the Green Enterprise Hub, I'd encourage everyone to reach out to them, even if it is sort of say, I'm right at the beginning of this journey and I don't know what I'm doing. You know, this is something that we all need to get to grips with. But yeah, my overall message would be it doesn't need to be something that's really daunting and intimidating, and it can be a really positive experience all round.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Tim. And we'll put those links to the CAF's website and the Westmoreland-in-Furness Green Enterprise Hub in the description. Yeah, Tim, thanks so much. It's really inspiring stuff. And yeah, you've given us kind of a very honest sort of review of the challenges you faced, and then like the successes that you had and the surprises along the way. So yeah, thanks so much, and all the best with the rest of the project.
No, thanks ever so much for having me, Joe. It's been great to spend some time with you. And yeah, anyone who wants to reach out to me, ask me any other questions, fire me an email, Tim@Fell Brewery. Let's all, yeah, get stuck into the journey.
Brilliant. Bye for now.
Fantastic. Goodbye.